just started out with coding about a year and a half back. I've been working with iOS extensively since then. Just about 4.5 months. And I started with Ember about 2 months into it. Yeah, before that I was working on C++, which is, if you know, is very interesting. Okay, so about Ember.js. Okay, it's been out since 2011. Okay, Apple was using heavily in their internal projects to work with it. Then it came out as they had a lot of bindings inside it, which became a little dirty. So Group came out and said, no, we want something out which does only the MVC part and not bound to the application so much. So it came out as Ember, which they renamed to Ember. Okay. And it's actively developing. So the thing was, I worked on my project about July to August, and it was 0.9, 0.8 then, the version. It's changed to like 1.0.0.2 to 3, and it's changed a lot since then. So when I went back to actually making slides for today, there's a lot of code breaking happening. So I try to cover and address as much as I can. So the main idea for me to use Ember was I needed something which auto updates my HTML page, so I don't have to like go back to my HTML page in jQuery and say put this, remove that, remove this. Okay, that was one thing, and give me a decent structure for me to organize my code. So because I came from an iOS background, there was heavy dependency on how MVC works. So for me to get accustomed to what was working, because I looked at Backbone before that, and it wasn't very clear. I thought, okay, no, it's a little too messy here. Then I went to Ember, then I went to Knockout. So then I thought, okay, I'll pick Ember or Knockout. So it's what I thought. So it could be a wrong decision well done, but I'm not too sure. So basic thing was they give you auto bring templates. Okay, templates as in you have your HTML page, you define your script tag, you define your code with the script tags, and you have your models and controllers. Okay, so you change something on your controllers using a model or anything like that, the HTML automatically updates. You don't need to make a change to the HTML page. Alright? Data binding, also you have two models, and you have some data which has to be replicated in another data, in another object. Okay. So if you want to make a change here, if you don't want to go back to making a change there, you want it to automatically synchronize in the background. Yeah. Computer properties, like you have object properties. Okay. Now so you have first, like the example I'm taking is the first name. So you have the person is the user object. You have first name, last name. Now I don't want to make a third object called full name. So I call a computer property. So it dependency is first name and last name. So when I call full name, it uses this at runtime and gives it back to me. Okay. So and there's something called state managers, routers, which is what Ember is completely moving into right now. As in it was there before. Okay, but what the theory is that they want the application to be built around the whole state manager. They want the state manager to manage my application. I don't think I'm not going to talk about it, and I'm not very versed with router to talk about it. Okay? The two dependencies that actually are there are jQuery and handlebars.js. So when I was working on it, at that point of time, handlebars.js was came bundled with the whole source. But now they removed it, they made separate. Alright? Can you guys see the code here? Yeah? Okay, this is my basic app.js. Okay, so I declare my code here. I just say Ember.application.create, and I can give my own properties there. Alright? So these two things have been introduced since I've been started working on it. Okay, so basically what they do is they expect you to have an application of controller for the whole app, and an application view for the whole app as such. Okay, and then you initialize. So when you run the initialized code, these two get binded onto the whole app. So Ember knows what the application, all the controllers and all the views are. Okay. So this is my source HTML. Okay, so I have declared my libraries here, jQuery, handlebars, and Ember. Okay. This is my that's having the head. So in the body, what I do is all my Ember code goes in script tags. Okay, and my script tags have type text, handlebars. Okay, that is when Ember knows that whatever is between this is what I'm supposed to process. Alright. So and over here, all HTML tags work. It will not show any error of any sorts. Whatever Ember is supposed to process will come in your handlebars. Okay. This. Okay. So if you look at the code over here, what I've written. So I've declared. Okay. This is my basic app. This has a property of author. Okay. So in my HTML code, I give you a basic example where app.author. That's all. Okay.
So we are restricted to using the handlebars templating.
There's heavy dependency on that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just define it as app.author. So when it actually renders on the browser, yeah.
So you got a curly brace out there. Can you replace that curly brace with some other thing which I want to? For example, if you use like server-side templating, which also uses curly braces, I will have an overlap. So is it possible to replace that curly braces with curly brace and a hash, or curly brace and a percentage?
I'm not sure. I haven't actually.
You can just use another templating engine other than handlebars. That should solve your problem.
So it's like you're doing templating inside templating?
No. I think he's mentioning Django, right? Because Django has the same template style, so it would clash with that.
But we have that type which identifies this as the handlebars thing, right?
So that is only for handlebar. That is for your Ember application to realize okay something happening here. But he's saying on the server side when Django actually passes it, so then it will be conflicting. No? So actually I'm not sure about that.
You can use a verbatim tag. That should help. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and this is what gets generated. Okay, if you want to show you the source code here, how it actually looks. Okay, any questions here, or should we just go on to the next?
Should you go in the back? Can you read it?
Yeah. Okay, so I'll explain a few things about what computer properties are and order of templates and all that. Okay, so this is the example I give you that time. So I have the app user. So Ember gives you objects, array controllers, views by default. You have to extend them and start using in your code. Alright? And they have a lot of properties defined. Okay, so you can actually start using them. So I'm creating it first, last, full, and so what happens over here is I have declared full as a computer property. Okay, by saying dot property first, last. Okay. The reason I'm doing this is that when it actually compiles, it realizes that this full actually depends on first and last. Okay, so any change I make in first and last gets propagated to full. Okay, when I'm calling full. Alright. So and yeah, can you say? Make sense? Okay. And subclassing, so you can, I'm subclassing a user which I just created. Okay, I'm creating an app parent. I'm saying first, last. And so what I'm doing is I'm binding the object. Okay. So now what happens, now in app, in the whole app, I created a property called location and I'm defining it over there. Okay. Over here, the name actually is only present at. Okay. This keyword called binding is for Ember to realize, okay, I'm binding this property to some other property in another object. Okay. So now at runtime, if I actually make a change in the object where I'm referencing at, this gets replicated right here at runtime. Okay, I'll give you a demo of that also. Okay. So this is my HTML which I just give you a demo of that. So this is what I've done. I have an author, I have location, okay, and application controller is right now a dummy which are not used for anything. And so okay, what this over here does is, so I'm giving, so your application you should have a template name, okay, and it basically is the superclass of all your views, okay, and in your HTML. So in your HTML, you define it here. So you're saying, okay, everything that comes within the whole script tags, you define it over here as data template name application. Alright. So what I've done here is, I've said, okay, basically here, page created by app.object. So this gets me the application, the app object. Alright. Now, if you go here. So my current object over here is first class this, okay, and since I'm inheriting, so I have the full property also here. Okay, so when I render it in HTML, that's here. So I say here app.current.full. So now the thing about this, now say let's say I change the values here. Okay, so what Ember uses is the get set. So you have to use get set to set properties. Got it? Yeah. So it changes dynamically because it changes the mode. Yeah. And and this is a computer property which I'm changing. Okay, so if I changed, let's say just my name, like, which is not dependent on anything also. It also should work.
Also spellings.
Yeah. So I have so I changed this object here, which is the location, as the author. Okay, and I changed this also first. Okay, and so because of cluster I have this available right there. Alright. So what's happening here is when I say present at bind, okay, this is my property here. When I say binding, Ember realizes, okay, this is bound some other object model. Okay. So I'm saying, okay, app.location is what it is. Okay. So when I say app.current.present at, this is what I get here. So I'm saying here app.current.present at. So it'll get the value from your app object. Okay. So if I change the value of the app object, or if I change it here, okay, they get at both places. This is called two-way binding. Okay, so if I change in my say the location here, yeah, that happens. So I mean, to me at least when I worked with it, it seemed like magic because I didn't have to do anything to this to happen.
What's the two-way binding? So there is from the property to the DOM.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so what I changed here is I changed locally. I changed in my user object the location. Alright, I say present at, I changed it here. Okay, now so ideally what I changed in my user object, when I say two-way binding, it should also change at my app object. Okay, so when I say app dot, so that also is changed. So I don't have to maintain two states. So state maintenance is happening by itself. Okay. Okay. So what I've done here is now so you have your button tags over here. What I said is, okay, so my action is what Ember gives me. So on click of that, I'm calling a method called BGs, which is present at app.current. Okay, so at this location, this is my target. Okay, so I just define it as, so if you look at the code here, so BGs is, I'm just setting the first and last name, I'm setting the first and last name. So that should automatically, so when I'm changing the first and last name, that should automatically change the full name by itself because of according to the property. Okay, so what happens? Any doubts in this demo, please? Huh? Okay. Actually, I'm not happy with it. I've written another small app which I can show you. Okay, so let me show you. Okay, so what I've written here is I've used API from Google Books. Okay, so you enter your query over here, it does a Google search, it gets back the JSON and displays it for you. Okay, I'll just show you what code it actually went into writing this. Okay, so I've defined my app over here. Okay, I've set developer and Twitter in my Twitter profile. The controller is there for dummy, not used for anything. Alright. So template name is this is what I've given in between script tags in HTML. So what you can do is say something like class names. Class names is for that. So in views, right, I have a bunch of properties which you can use. So I can say class names, I can take comma separated values. So this is what comes as my class in HTML tag. Yeah. So I can define my classes in my CSS. I can define it here. Like okay, this view will have these classes, and your HTML tag will get generated as such. Alright. So okay, this is my model which I created for a book. It has these bunch of things: title, subtitle, authors array, rating, thumbnail link, web link. Alright, and I've said okay because the authors array which I'm getting back is it's an SJSON, so I have an array of JSON, an array of authors. So I've written a function which gives me a string to display weekly. Is what I'm doing over there. Yeah. Then name again, so it gives me a title, subtitle, and just making a string out of title, subtitle, and showing it. If you look at the code over here, you can say where name you can get title, and then I'm appending subtitle and I'm displaying it and returning it. Okay, and over here, I've said property depends on authors array. So your computer property actually will every time this changes, it will also change over there. Yeah. Similarly for title and subtitle. Okay. So I've used here something called array controller which Ember gives me. Okay. So what the array controller does is it has something called content. Okay. This is by default what the array controller uses. Okay. Now if you think of the whole MVC model, you have your models using controllers. So the view is what I will later. So my controller has the model inside it. Okay. So I will say content and I'll say this and so it's my array. So my content will have the model. As in it will have all the objects in it. Okay, it's not separate. I'm saying this it's separate because I'm coming from an iOS background. So when it's not very tightly coupled there. Okay. Here when I say it's not tightly coupled here, let's say it's under the object. The controller's model is under the controller. Okay. So this load books is what it gets. It's the data from the API. Okay. I've defined. Okay, so I'll show you this first. So I have a text field which Ember gives me. Alright. It also gives me a function called insert new line. Okay, so insert new line is in a text field. You hit enter, it calls this function. Okay. So I said insert new line, and it calls in the app.books array. It calls a function called load books. Alright. So your books array has a function called load books. Here I am doing this so that I don't lose the scope. Alright. So now the thing is I need to convert it to your URL format. So I'm just replacing it with a plus spaces because Google the API requires that. So I'm doing a get JSON. In the get JSON, okay. So now this is where the data is coming in. Okay. So I get an array. So this I set it to content. So my content variable has I'm resetting it here. Alright. So every time I get new data, I'm resetting it, and I do this. App.search query add query. Okay. So what I'm doing over here is I'm a little slow because I've been traveling for the past 3 days. So I wrote this about a week ago. Okay, so okay, one second, I'm lost here. Okay, this code is what I'm just storing the history, whatever. So I search for book. I'm just storing it in my queries array. Okay, so I don't use track of what I've searched for before. Alright, so I was a little slow on that. So what I do over here is, so my search queries I've declared another array controller here. Okay, so this contains all the queries I've searched before. So every time I do load books, before doing load books, I'm just saying, okay, so put this query in my array, so it will show me what I've actually searched for. Alright, so for all the data that I've got from the Google API, I'm getting the data. Okay, so I'm creating a variable of type book. So app.book.create. Okay, so for that I pass these properties. So title is this, subtitle is this. So this item.volume is all from Google API. Okay, for each array element that I get from there. Okay, so I'm creating it and I'm pushing it in push object. So I'm calling the push object. Okay, on that. So that is what I scoped as this. So your contents over here gets pushed. So every book gets pushed into this. Okay. Yeah. I'll just show you the HTML. Okay. So what I've done over here is, so now the book queries field, right, has the what? So you have app.books array. Okay, that I'm showing it here. Okay, so I have an each block in my HTML. Okay, for each in app.books array, I'm doing this. Okay, so I have a tr/td. In td, there are these elements. Okay, I'll just go through them. So so the first element I'm saying is this .weblink. Okay, so what happens over here is this part is also Ember. Okay, so in the HTML part, I can say, okay, A has a property called href. Okay, to href, I'm binding an attribute which I've defined in the view. Okay, so what I've defined in the view is so over here I said, okay, so this .weblink. So this is the array object itself. That's what's populated in the contents array. Okay, so for every object in the contents array, I'm saying for the href property, I'm saying it is this .weblink. Yeah, clear? Okay, and I'm displaying this .title over there. Okay, and second array is this .authors. So this .authors is a computer property which I'm getting from all the authors that comes as a array. Okay, and img also has a bind attribute. So I'm saying the source is this. Okay, so whenever it dynamically changes, it picks it up and shows it here in the templates. Alright, so let's say search for Harry. Is it right?
No, actually, I think it just dropped.
Okay. Okay, so what I defined in my table is what's coming up here. Okay. So this is my search query which I searched, and I'm storing an array of them. Okay, so let's say I search for Sheldon. Okay, so what's happening here is I've used an array to display this stuff here. Okay, so but what you can actually see is if I push in objects, it goes in that order. Right, but my order is reversed over here. If you notice. Okay. So for that is actually what I'm doing here. Okay. So my search query has a property called reverse over here. Okay. So I say this dot so this is your contents that goes to array, and I'm calling a reverse function. Okay. Now what does it actually? Let's struggle for a little bit. So it has property dot add each. Okay. So when you do this, so any change in the values in any of the array elements, because you're saying okay, it depends on the whole array. Okay. So any change in any of the objects will actually make change to the whole array. So this gets recomputed again on the fly. Okay, this whole add is what confuses me quite a bit. Okay, which you need to remember.
When the array changes, does it does re-rendering of entire HTML or selectively?
No, it re-renders that whole, whatever is there in each.
For example, if you add a new query, it's like we are entering only one new element in that particular array. So wouldn't it be more effective if it just appends that HTML to the existing HTML?
Yeah, so one major error which I actually have, which is not very clear, is how rendering of the whole web page happens. Okay. Now say I change a lot of elements. Okay. So I can change one element, go second element, third element. Okay. So what I'm still confused about is whether Ember actually waits for all three changes to happen, then renders the HTML, or does it render each time something changes?
I think it does it each time. Could be a debounce function.
But then that will involve a lot of overhead, right? I mean,
Ember, the general problem with Ember is but it's worth it.
So certain libraries like Knockout you mentioned earlier, it does selective rendering only. So if you are changing a large array, and if you change one particular element, so correspondingly it will change only the selective UI.
Yeah, so if array is defined within that hash view, right? Only that can get modified. The rest of the HTML remains the same. It doesn't know the rest of the HTML. So when I should be this.
So not only that HTML, but the section within the HTML affected by that particular element of the array.
Yeah, that will change because anything within that, anything within. Wait, so I'll show you this. So when I say this, right?
Only the element is related. Only that.
Yeah. So in my HTML, I say this. Okay. So my add each array, books array. Okay. So when I say this, right? Ember actually gives you it gives you the HTML. Okay. So it generates its own IDs. Okay. So one thing which I really struggled with Ember was I can't mess with the IDs. Okay. Because it uses the IDs of the HTML elements to keep track of what's actually happening. Okay. So if I change something in my model, Ember realizes okay, this model element is coupled to this ID element in HTML. Okay. So I have to go and make a change over there only. Okay. It'll make a change there, and I think the browser decides how to render it.
You can inspect it on the browser.
Yeah.
The script tags are on each
correct.
So fine.
So for every tier I'm rendering it, right? So
script tags.
Yeah, we can see this. Yeah. So like this. So this gets generated. So you cannot mess with. I can say okay. If I use CSS and say okay, my ID is name, and I use jQuery and say change ID, the ID would have gone somewhere else because Ember would have used for doing something else. Okay, so that's one thing which I actually ran into earlier, and someone moved out about it. Okay, so. I was working on something actually over here which did not work. So basically what I was trying to do was when you click over here, it works, but it's a very dirty hack. This actually works. Yeah. So what I'm storing here is now against the books array I'm storing the element. Okay, so when I click on the element, that again calls a function to my books array, which says okay, for this books array I have to load. So my query is stored. Okay. Okay, I'll just finish this part. Okay, so my books array has a search query field that is stored. Okay, so whenever I make a change in my text element, that gets changed over here, search query. Okay, that's because I bounded in the HTML. Okay, so. Okay, so this is my book query field. Okay, this is my text. This is my text field over here. That's here. Okay, I have bound it to app.bookstudy.search query. Okay, so you just copy that. Okay, so a books array has this one variable also called search query, which is bound to the text field. Okay, so if you search briefly here, okay, so that's Harry Potter. Alright. Now say I type something else here. Okay. So do the same thing here. Because I've bound it, right? It's changed. In my model also. Because I changed, I just typed something in my view, nothing else. Okay, because my model is bound to the view and the view is bound to this HTML element here. So between the HTML and the view is what's happening Ember does. Okay. So if I change something here, my model control also changes. So you can see the difference here. So I just typed something and it actually changed. I think I'm done with the demo. If you have any doubts, you can ask me.
Any cons to the framework? I mean, there's a lot of good stuff obviously, but any cons? Any reason you would recommend against using?
I see. It's a very basic app. What I did was actually done in Backbone and got away with a lot of things. But one thing, yeah, it's a rapidly changing framework. So what I did like 3 months ago is breaking completely. It's really breaking. And documentation is what I found very trouble with using. Yeah. And learning curve, I would say, is a little more coming that it's the first framework I actually learned. Like after jQuery, it's the first thing which I actually learned. So I really can't compare with either Backbone or Angular or Angular.
So, do you know how it compares to Angular, for instance?
No, so that's what I use.
Yeah. No, because it looks very similar. I don't know Angular so well, but it looks very similar.
So actually when John gave his talk, he was actually referencing, so when you wrote your templates, there was a lot of stuff happening in the HTML tag itself. Okay. So that I'm avoiding here. In few cases I need to define in the tags what view is bound to what view in my Ember views. Okay. That is the only thing which you need to do with my HTML tag. Otherwise there's no HTML tag, you don't change anything in the HTML tags.
Okay.
So when you say data template name is this, that's the only thing, nothing else.
Okay.
You don't bind your models to the user.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I had one. What is the best way to externalize all these templates into another file?
You can call it views.js and you can use it. No.
Sorry?
You can put all your views in a separate JS file and you can call it in your HTML. Like when you say hit.
But wouldn't that be like writing HTML in JavaScript?
If you're using handlebars, for example, you can have js.hs files on the server, and then you can compile them there and serve it over here. So that takes care of it.
It's like a more clean way.
Yeah.
You'll avoid the Django problem as well.
These are not pure handlebar templates, right?
No, these are handlebar templates.
So you can compare it.
Yeah. They can be compiled, yes.
And then you click the compilation, right?
Exactly, you can load them off JS files. I think you just have to figure out a way to name your template as, register it under application or whatever else you're using as a template name, but yeah, should be doable.
See, my talk is the bare basics from what I learned from my own experience. I didn't do too much research into what I actually talk about. So.
Okay. Thank you very much.